Section 8.5 is on how to add and subtract rational functions. So before we get started with this, we're going to review on how to simply add, subtract, multiply, and divide fractions. So welcome back, 5th graders! We're going to start some simple review from 5th grade. First on how to add and subtract fractions. Number 1 is how to add and subtract fractions. First you need to find a common denominator, and then once you find that common denominator, you need to add or subtract, if it's addition or subtraction, the numerators and keep the same denominator. So if we had a half plus a third, you need to find a common denominator. Well, common denominator between 2 and 3 would be 6. So you multiply the top and the bottom of a half times 3, because 3 times 2 gives you 6. And over here you multiply the top and the bottom times 2, because 3 times 2 gives you 6. So now we have 3 over 6 plus 2 over 6 equals 5. Add the numerator, keep the same denominator, over 6. Not 5 over 12, 5 over 6. Subtracting is the same thing. Find a common denominator. So between 5 and 8, common denominator would be 40. So multiply 8 on top and bottom over here, and on this one multiply top and bottom times 5. So you now have 24 over 40 minus 5 over 40. Subtract the numerator, 24 minus 5, 19, over, keep the same denominator, 40. So that's adding and subtracting fractions. Let's look at multiplying and dividing. Multiplying, all you do is multiply straight across. Very simple. If we have 5/6 times 3 halves, just multiply straight across. So 5 times 3 is 15 over 6 times 2, which is 12. Then to simplify this, you look for any common factors. You can take a 3 out of both of these. If you take a 3 out of 15, you're left with 5, and a 3 out of 12, you're left with 4. So your answer is 5 over 4. Dividing fractions, we're going to rewrite as multiplication. You're going to flip the second fraction and multiply. So you should have 4/9 times, flip the second fraction, and then multiply. This is how you divide. Flip the second fraction and multiply. So we have 4 times 3 is 12, over 9 times 8, which is 72. A common factor in 12 and 72 is 12. 12 goes into both of them. So 12 divided by 12 is 1, and 12 goes into 72 6 times. So your final answer is 1/6. Now that we have reviewed, let's go into actually adding and subtracting rational functions. So now we're not just dealing with numbers, we're looking at functions. So this first example, we're going to have like denominators, so it's going to be a simpler example. But we're looking at 2x over x plus 6 minus 5 over x plus 6. So now we're subtracting rational functions, not just numbers. These are functions. But the same properties apply. When we're subtracting or adding functions that have fractions, you have to first make sure if they have the same denominator. So here they both have a denominator of x plus 6, so we don't have to find a common denominator. That's already done for us. So you just subtract the numerators and then keep the denominator. So our numerator is going to be 2x minus 5, and you can't subtract these because they're not like terms, over our denominator is x plus 6. And you're done. That's your answer. You can't simplify this. In order to simplify this whole thing, every single term has to have a like term in it, or a like factor. So you can't just cross out this 2 and 6 and simplify. It has to be every single term has to be able to simplify. Let's try something where you have to find a common denominator first. When you have something that looks like this problem right here, the common denominator is going to be this denominator multiplied by this denominator. So your common denominator is actually going to be 6x squared times 4x squared minus 12x. So in order to get both this fraction and this fraction to have this denominator, what you're going to do is you're going to multiply this side by this denominator and this side by this denominator. So with this fraction, you're going to multiply the top and the bottom by 6x squared. Whatever you do to the top, you have to do to the bottom, and vice versa. So on this side, you're going to multiply both the top and the bottom by 4x squared minus 12x. So your next step is to multiply all this stuff together. So we're going to have 5 times 4x squared minus 12x over 6x squared times 4x squared minus 12x plus 6x squared times x over 6x squared times 4x squared minus 12x. Now I'm going to go ahead and distribute in my numerator so I can add my numerator together. So I'm going to go down here and I'm going to distribute my 5 through to each term. So I have 20x squared minus 60x. That's still over the 6x squared, 4x squared minus 12x. Plus, and multiply the 6x squared times x, just 6x to the third, over my 6x squared times 4x squared minus 12x. Alright, so now I'm going to add my numerator together, and I really can't add any of these together because I have an x to the third, x squared, and x. So I'm basically just going to rewrite this all. 6x to the third plus 20x squared minus 60x. All over, if I add, I keep the denominator. So I don't add the denominator together, I just keep it. So 6x squared times 4x squared minus 12x. Now your last step is to simplify all this. The only time you can simplify something is if you can cross out something in every single term. Or if you have multiplication, then you can just cross it out. So what we're going to do is look and see what we can pull out of the numerator. And we know that every term has an x, and we can also pull a 2 out of every term. So my numerator is now going to look like I'm going to pull out a 2x out of everything. So I'm going to be left with 3x squared plus 10x minus 20. All over my 6x squared times 4x squared minus 12x. Now, since I have multiplication going on, I can cross out what these two have in common. So there's a 2x in the top and a 6x squared in the bottom. I can cross out that entire 2x, and on the bottom I'm left with, well, the 6, if I pull a 2 out of there, I'm left with 3. And I'm crossing out 1x. So I still have 1x left over. So now my final answer is 3x squared plus 10x minus 20 over 3x times 4x squared minus 12x. Let's look at subtracting now. Now in ones like these, it's going to be a lot easier to factor your denominators first. It'll make it a lot simpler. If you look over here, you can factor this. You're looking for 2 factors of 4 that add to give you 4. So this written as factors is x plus 2 times x plus 2. Over here on this side, x squared minus 4 is the difference of 2 squares. So this can be factored as x plus 2x minus 2. Now to find the common denominator, you're just going to take this in pieces. You want to take one piece that each of these has. Well, each fraction has an x plus 2. You want to think about any one fraction, what is the most that any one fraction has? Well, this first fraction has 2x plus 2's. This one only has 1. So since this one has 2, we need at least 2 of them. So your common denominator has to be x plus 2, x plus 2. So we got the x plus 2's covered. Now the only piece we're missing is x minus 2. And there's only 1 in this fraction, so we only need 1. Again, how we got the x plus 2, x plus 2, how come I decided to have 2 of them? Because any one of these fractions, like if I look at this first one, there are 2 here. If I look at the second one, there is only 1. I have to take the most. Well, this one has 2, so I need 2 of them, because that's the most that any one fraction has. So this is going to be the common denominator. So to get this, on this first one, if I want x plus 2, x plus 2, x minus 2, I have to multiply the top and the bottom times x minus 2, because I don't have that over here. And over here, I need 1 more x plus 2. And now I'm going to multiply. So if I multiply, I'm going to FOIL this out right away. So I have x squared minus 2x plus x minus 2 all over my common denominator minus, and here I'm going to distribute my 2 through, so 2x plus 4 over my common denominator. And then I'm going to subtract and keep my denominator. So if I subtract all this, I have x squared. Then if I subtract all my x's, I have negative 2 plus 1 minus a 2. So that's going to be negative 3x. Then I have negative 2 minus 4, which is 6, all over our common denominator. Now your final step is to see if this numerator will factor and that things will cancel out. So you're looking for factors of 6 that subtract to give you 3, and that doesn't exist, so this is your final answer. Now let's look at something that's a little bit more complex, when you have a fraction inside of a fraction. Your first step is to write the numerator and denominator as separate fractions, then flip and multiply the 2 fractions. So here's an example. We have a fraction within another fraction. So your first step, like it just said, is your entire numerator and entire denominator are separate fractions, and you're going to flip and multiply. So we have the top. We're going to multiply and flip this whole bottom so that we're actually dividing. So we have x plus 2 over 1 plus, flip the second one as x over 2. First thing, before you can multiply this times this entire thing, you need to add these 2 fractions together. In order to add these, you need a common denominator, so here you need a 2. So you're going to multiply this top and bottom times 2. So really we're looking at x plus 2 times 2x plus 4 over 2 plus x plus 2. Then we add those together. I have 3x plus 4 all over 2. Now you can multiply these 2 fractions. And multiplying is easy, you just multiply straight across. And right away we can cancel out these 2's, and they just turn into 1's. So really we have 3x plus 4 over x plus 2. These don't factor or anything, nothing can cancel out, so that's your final answer.